Okay, I'm forced to make content, so I'm gonna give y'all a slight video on the D-Von Dudley Jim Ross situation. So long story short, D-Von comes out. D-Von comes out saying JR straight up walked up to him, said that I hate your skin color. Basically saying, I can't stand you, N-word. In front of Bubba, Spike, Paul Heyman, and Tommy Dreamer. And D-Von said this on Maven's podcast. You know, Bubba allured to it. Maven allured to it. D-Von didn't really want to give out the name, but they implied who it was strongly. You know, JR responded like, I don't remember saying that. Anytime somebody says, I don't remember saying that, they remember saying that. You know, he just couldn't outright lie and say, I didn't say that. So he had to say, I don't remember saying that. But it just goes to show you, you know, it solidifies more of Jim Ross being a racist. Now, one thing with Paul Heyman, you know, Paul Heyman's Jewish. So D-Von was saying in ECW he never experienced racism. And Paul Heyman has a history of, you know, working with black people fine. D-Von said the moment he got to WWE, you know, Jim Ross was right there, you know, being racist. And Jim Ross has a history of this. Now, I mean, years later, D-Von wants to get his kids into the business. So he tries to work for AEW, but that didn't work out. But guess who's at AEW? Jim Ross. So behind the scenes, most likely, Jim Ross is in Tony Khan's ear because Tony Khan isn't a racist. Jim Ross is in Tony Khan's ear, you know, probably manipulating the situation so D-Von could be unsuccessful. And that's just the type of stuff, you know, black people got to deal with when you trying to be in certain places, get promotions, you know, get the ball rolling. And you kind of got to blame people like Booker T, Mark Henry for, and D-Von too, because D-Von was like, he didn't want to say anything, didn't want to go to HR because, hey, he got a family, he just got to stick it out. And you got to kind of blame those guys for not banding together, saying anything to change the company, change that work environment. But if you're making, you know, millions of dollars, and let's not even say millions of dollars, let's just say you grossing 400, 500,000 a year wrestling with WWE. You're not about to jeopardize that because you can't get that anywhere else as a wrestler. You know, unless you have some Hollywood ties, you're not even making close to that. You know, you could be a wrestler for 5-7 years and retire off of that. Or, you know, you might be able to start a side business that brings you money forever, you know, making that kind of money. But that just goes to show you, as great of a wrestler D-Von is, you know, you in the tag team, Team 3D, the Dudleys, you still have a racist like Jim Ross just plotting on your downfall. Now, one thing, that may have ticked Jim Ross off, never really heard any racist stories with Jim Ross and like Crime Time, per se. But New Jack said that D-Von is a white guy in a black body. So D-Von is one of those. Y'all know what I'm talking about. He's one of those. He's one of those token types. And maybe that is what made Jim Ross single out D-Von. D-Von might have been backstage talking, so quote unquote acting white. And you don't really have that type in the WWE. Booker T gives it off a little bit, but Booker T was solidified. You couldn't really hate on Booker T. And Booker T really, he wasn't for the ribs. No one really effed with Booker T like that. You know what I'm saying? Jim Ross couldn't walk up to Booker T and say, I don't like your black skin, because Booker T probably would have murdered Jim Ross if Jim Ross came up to Booker T and said that. But D-Von, like, who is D-Von? He's a nobody. He didn't really have stake in the company like that. But New Jack exposed that a long time ago, that D-Von was one of those black guys that act white. I don't really know how in depth, New Jack felt like that. But that's probably what ticked off JR. That probably made JR feel like, okay, who the hell is this guy? He's in the circle, in the locker room doing his thing, but he's trying to act like one of us. And I get that. It's kind of almost like you have a white rapper who's like acting black. It throws you off. It kind of like, man, what is he doing? He ain't from the streets. That's what black people say whenever you get a white rapper who's talking about trapping or something, like Malibu's Most Wanted. Maybe Jim Ross viewed D-Von as the opposite of Malibu's Most Wanted. I don't know what that is, but that's probably what Jim Ross and other white guys saw, and the ECW guys accepted that. And you might have had WWE guys like, oh, we don't play that Wigger shit over here. That's probably what that was. And it infuriated Jim Ross so much, he had to just walk up to him and say, I don't like your black skin. I'm telling you, that's probably what exactly went down. Jim Ross, I'm not going to say Jim Ross don't like black people. Jim Ross didn't like the fact that D-Von was acting white and he's black. We know what that means. We can't really say exactly what it is, but I can't really put my finger on it, because I don't know the type of stuff D-Von was actually doing backstage. But just going off of what New Jack said, D-Von loves to act white, and he has a white wife, and Jim Ross hated that. I mean, hated it. And I could go a little deeper, and I'm gonna just throw this out there. When Jim Ross and Paul Heyman would commentate together, go back and watch that. Jim Ross did not feed off Paul Heyman energy. Jim Ross was always stale. You know, he acted like he couldn't even do his job. He hated the fact he had to work with Paul Heyman just because Paul Heyman tolerated D-Von. I don't think it was because he tolerated blacks. I think it's because Paul Heyman loved D-Von and the Dudleys. They made him a lot of money. He brought him to WWE, and Jim Ross just, every day he hated it. So I think that's what the big issue was, you know. You know, y'all let me know down in the comment section what y'all think. You know, is Jim Ross really a racist? Put yes or no in the comment section. You know, I'm gonna give y'all another video probably later this week. I still gotta do. I'm gonna let y'all know I'm not doing no Raw review. You know, if I do a Raw review, it's gonna be the shortest Raw recap rant, you know, that I ever done. It might be a short. There's nothing to really talk about on Raw, but y'all put in the comment section, engage with the video, man. Like, comment, subscribe. You know, what y'all think about, you know, Devon and JR beef.